All right, terrific. Well, thank you to everybody for coming out. This is a fortuitous day. I mean, some of these bills you'll see are in committees right this very minute. Up until just 5 minutes ago, I was refreshing the website that Sheila posted below to see how some of these bills are being ruled on. Or stormwater natural resources focused. There's just a lot to digest here. And reading the bills themselves is step one. That's the link that Sheila has put into the chat. Go through the Tennessee legislature, capitol.tn.gov, and search for some of these bills as we're going along. And so, because understanding the intent of this, requires some insight that we're going to try to give as we speak about the bills. There's some screenshots. You could just Google Tennessee Legislation General Assembly. You'll see bill search there. The best way to get to them is the name of the bills, which will be in the headers of all the slides. They usually start with HB zero something. And we'll jump right into this thing here. And before we get into the Tennessee bills, there's some insight that I wanted to provide about just the general theme of 2025 legislation here in the state. It's kind of the reduction of the authority of state and local government very slowly. I had the word erosion in there because I like it for stormwater, but it's a lot of these seek to hand private industry or developers a little bit more power and leverage in interactions with the government, whether it be monetary or decision making. And it's fun to remember in our minds that it's usually easier to amend a bill than introduce a new bill. So sometimes these will be accepted as is and they could be amended in the future, or they're amended on their way through committees. So that is what you'll need to remember here, is that you'll see the main text of the bill as it was originally written. Sometimes they'll have three, four different amendments that are considered on their way through to passage. And those amendments often have a lot of detail that's extremely pertinent to what the final bill ends up looking like. But I want to talk about WOTUS a little bit first, because just last month there were, to try to hide the ribbon here, some rulings on waters of the U.S. that are downstream, pun intended, of Sackett versus the EPA, which was ruled in 2023. It was the final decision on, I guess you could call them geographically isolated wetlands, GIW. We'll be talking about that a lot today and using that shorthand. But the agency has moved to eliminate discrete features as being connections between wetlands. So that would be culverts, swales, or ditches. In other words, they're not establishing a continuous surface connection to a jurisdictional water. So, what does that mean? It means that the definition of a geographically isolated wetland is a little tighter than it was in 2023, and it's a reversal of course to what has been traditionally seen as a geographically isolated wetland. So we're keeping our eyes on this. The WOTUS has been a concept for as long as I've been practicing, and it is an ongoing morph based on Supreme Court decisions and so forth. But this is a relatively big move. This is ensuring that the volume of geographically isolated wetlands that are dictated federally goes up versus what was maybe not geographically isolated before. And what's considered to be a federal wetland is driving a lot of the state's decisions, because the key thing to take away from Sackett versus the EPA was it kicked it to the states. The states get to decide how to rule on their own geographically isolated wetlands. And Tennessee is one of the first states to make a major foray into that legislative space, and other states are watching what we do. And that brings us to HB 0541. Yesterday at about 5 o'clock, they ruled on this in the Senate and it was passed 26-6. So it is ready for transmission to the House, meaning it's probably going to get there. Some amendments were nullified, some were accepted. Amendment 2 was the one that was accepted. But you'll remember this from last year. It was sent to summer study in 2024. A basic rehashing of Sackett in the state of Tennessee. And, TDEC did a really bang up job of getting a bunch of groups together during summer study to try to make logical, reasonable compromises in their decisions that they were going to send to the legislature. And, Commissioner Salyers had to make that decision under his name based on everything that we gave him. We had some great workshops. A meeting of the minds came together, engineers, lawyers, scientists. But I want to talk a little bit about those summer study results so that you understand why the decision was made to pass this as is. Most of Tennessee's GIWs are pretty small. So 50% are less than 1 acre. That's a really wild number. 90% are less than 9 acres. So we're talking about potholes, very small areas, ephemeral areas that are difficult to try to go out and determine the edges of. You have to go out and use your skills as a wetland scientist to figure out what's facultative wet and so forth. So these aren't big riverine things along the Mississippi River. We're talking about the wetlands that you and I may see on a daily basis in our communities. So, knowing that most of these are pretty small, in my opinion, that means that they're probably more threatened. If you see these small, less than an acre wetlands, the ability of man to even like build over them and alter them is higher. So, going to the 18 different recommendations that TDEC made, I just cherry picked a few. You can go read the entire document. It's big, it's great. I think they did a good job, like I said. But number 9 was to broaden the scope of general permits for these wetlands. So that's kind of what we're looking at with the legislation that just passed. And number 13, to update and refine the TRAM, Tennessee Rapid Assessment Methodology, which helps wetland scientists. It was relatively obscure, but it may come into play now, but it helps wetland scientists determine the resource value of a wetland. And TDEC is working on that as we speak. Recommendation number 14, refine and maintain mapping to be more useful. And they rolled out the wetland screening tool back in December. Really nifty thing based on LiDAR and machine learning that helps understand where you may have geographically isolated wetlands on site and plan for those. Trying to scoot through this relatively quickly. So the legislature always wants to know monetarily what these effects are going to be. Will the lack of permitting, if all of these small wetlands are requested to be altered, will that be a revenue stream loss for TDEC? How many permits and permit fees will not be required anymore? And they found out that there was a relatively small amount, 107 permits for wetlands under a quarter acre, and only 10 individual permits. So it was considered to be not a significant monetary number. And artificial wetlands, they said if it's a man-made wetland, that was caused by some sort of impoundment or uh, man-made activity, those are negligible as well. There are amendments down there at the bottom of the screen. A lot of text here, but all that they're saying is these sorts of changes are not going to be voluminous, because that was what we kind of thought. We really wanted to know, okay, if there are 4,000 discrete wetland features or something like that, how big are they? Where are they at? How under threat are they? And what would the cumulative impact be hydrologically, financially, economically, uh, ecologically? And the takeaway was that we can probably, well, at least I'm speaking for TDEC here, quarter acre is kind of that threshold, de minimis, if you will. So the compensatory mitigation for anything under quarter acres will likely not be necessary. And then up and above there, there'll be a 2-to-1 ratio for compensatory mitigation, but that depends on moderate quality wetlands. You can read these amendments. These are all in the amendments. They're really long. I suggest that you Google HBO 541 and you read Amendment 2, because that has been passed in the Senate now, and it will be how wetlands are able to be altered, and if they are altered above a quarter acre, what the fees will be and what the offsets will be. That's being dictated right now by that amendment that was passed yesterday. Um, any thoughts, Sheila, on this one? We've been following this one for a long time, and that is like an absolute crash course in a big, big discussion.
No, I'm trying to add some stuff to the chat. So if you guys are following in the chat, I'm over here kind of helping. If you guys are trying to get to capitaltn.gov, where to click on it, search that, and then click on the amendment, click on two. So I'm in the chat, helping people on that side. They can look at that while you're talking. So I've kind
Because
of
we
got a
could,
little search thing going in the back. So if people want to know how to get to it, I'm trying to get them there. But there's no comments so far. There's no
okay.
questions in the chat.
because we could spend a whole hour talking about this one, but there are other bills that I think are still really, really important.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a session later once this gets enacted that goes through the details of these. Once again, 5 o'clock yesterday, these amendments were accepted. So that's why I'm not the authority on this sort of thing, and I'm just kind of armchairing this. We're
Yeah.
just figuring it out what the final ruling is going to be.
We're just
Uh,
presenting to you guys what is on the legislature website so that you can go out and do your own research. And then once some of these do get approved and signed on as bills, we can send that back out through Charlene, and you can take it to your attorneys or whoever if you're a city or county and you want some more clarification on any of it.
Yeah, because the wetland one seems like this big national thing that,
Yeah.
we're being looked at, and it's going to be just this way of life from now on. But some of these other bills are explicitly going to impact your day-to-day life, like HB 0375,
Yeah.
that if you are an official of a local government, I guess that's an MS4. Not certain if that's a utility, but if you assess or collect a fee of more than $500, you need to document the justification and cost basis of that fee, and that will be public record. And that was signed. That is already signed by the governor. That is a law that takes effect next July. So I can't really think of many fees that are less than $500. So and what is a cost basis that is valid or not? You document it, but I think the next step is saying, well, okay, so we've justified and have a cost basis for this fee, but who is making a judgment call to say, wait a second, I think that development fee is rigorous or a burdensome. They love to use the word burdensome. I'm not certain how that's going to look, but it's just one of these I hate to get political, but we're talking politics here. Like, what did you do last week? Kind of things. You know, tell us why you levied this fee. It seems like a government efficiency move, perhaps, but that's law. That's passed. This is another one. This was the one that I was refreshing in the background before this call. HB 0542. Um, Last year, we saw a very similar bill come through. And this has to do with plan review, and this has to do with
Got it.
submittals. So that new requirements for a utility company's review of plans related to water. I took it in there, but it's electric and natural gas as well. So it includes drainage and stormwater utilities that you must complete a review of submitted development plans within 30 days. And if you fail to do that, the developer can revoke that and hire a third party examiner who's a qualified engineer, which we can debate, to conduct the review instead. And then they must submit a report, and then the utility has 10 days to approve that, or they're automatically reviewed and the review fees are refunded. So TDEC did a similar study on this. They asked them for ARAPs and other plan reviews and permit reviews, how frequently are things aging past 30 days? And the answer was very few. But, that's TDEC. We're not talking about Rutherford County, other communities that may be struggling with permit reviews.
Hey,
Sheila, do you want to talk a little bit more about this?
hey, Eddie,
Or does
you're
Eddie
on
want to talk about
mute.
it?
Charlene, can you mute some of these people? I would help you, but I don't have the authority to
I'm
do that.
trying. There's a lot of people, so I'm trying to
I
figure
know.
out who it is.
I think it was 865-223-2111.
Everybody's muted. I got it.
This one, all right, we're looking at HB
Plan review. Yeah.
542, right?
Yep.
Yeah, this one is pretty concerning for everybody. I hope you got Eddie, right? Get it back here, Eddie. This one did have amendments. So initially when we presented this at the conference with floodplain, and then we talked about it at our regional meeting, they did not have the specific amendment that said what was an officially a utility. They have clarified that to say that it is not just water, wastewater, gas. It actually includes stormwater management and drainage. That's in the amendment. That's in I think Amendment 2. If I pulled the right one up, I think it was Amendment 2 that they pulled in.
Mm.
So I know some people may be collecting stormwater utility fees. They may be only doing a stormwater utility review, and they may be charging a stormwater review fee. This is a bill I would watch closely if that is going to affect you. I'm assuming some of our people do this. And you know, it's not just under planning commission. It's not under a bulk review. You have your own stormwater section and your reviews. So this one I would watch very carefully. If you
And
do, if
some of
you
the
do
questions we
stormwater review,
got
I
were
see.
at conference was like, how frequently do we think this is going to happen? Is this realistic? You know, if I'm a developer and that 30 days expires, am I going to incur an additional expense to get a third party review, or am I going to try to do this, or just wait a few more days? Because is there incentive to try to circumvent the system? And the only incentive I can see is a disingenuous incentive if you think that you wouldn't pass the initial muster from a utility company's review. So I don't know if on the other side of things, because there was one that had to that concerned like building codes and fire marshals. I'm not sure how many people have invoked their right yet to get a third party examiner. That's only been law since September. So it is very concerning. It opens the door wide open for potential abuse. Like who's to say, a qualified engineer, like, well, yeah, I'm a PE, but like I could make some big bucks by reviewing X building company's plans on the side and saying, sure thing, brother. That's possible. I just don't know how many instances of this we're going to see.
Right. Josh Rogers is asking about the $1,000 fee. Josh, I recommend go in and read that bill and then read the memorandums and oh, amendments to that bill. But it did reference that they were also not able to charge more than $1,000 per review.
Hmm.
And if it's specifically stormwater, now, I mean, these haven't been approved yet. These are not official bills, but these have gotten movement. They have not been failed yet. So that's why we're bringing them out.
Yeah,
And
this is the one where I'm really waiting to see
yeah,
how this shakes out, because there are things nested like that $1,000. They're nested within the
mhm.
wording, and we'll get to one later that had even more clauses where it was like you read the first two sentences and you're like, yeah, fine, and then the third sentence you're like, oh wait, that would completely change how we levy development fees. It as written, that's how these things show up. But in those finance ways and means committees, amendments are drafted kind of on the fly or presented on the fly. Maybe they had a draft beforehand that wasn't public, and that's what they get accepted with. So unfortunately, on this one, we don't have a final ruling, yay or nay, or the final amendments on it. But we'll watch it and we'll send an email out. But this is probably maybe the top one to watch.
Yeah, actually, this one is, I don't know that the $1,000 was with this one. It may have been the other one. But it says that, well, the amendment says that they cannot charge a fee no more than the fee established in a schedule of fees and charges adopted by the utility.
Hmm.
Let's see. They, some of them had to do with the third party reviewers too.
Hmm. It'd be nice if there was a maximum fee for the third party reviewers. That would give me a little more uh,
Hmm.
quiet about this if that was settled, so that there wasn't some incentive to via
Oh,
some wholly owned subsidiary that no somebody not concerned with conflict of interest could just send them a bunch of work via this mechanism. That's what I'm concerned about, and what a lot of constructors are concerned about.
yeah. So we do have some more chat. Parsi's asking about, does it apply to stormwater review or only if they establish utility? In the top, in the very initial piece of this, it says utility. So I think if your stormwater is embedded within your planning commission, your engineering department, and you aren't charging specifically stormwater utility review fees, then it may not pertain. But that's when I was saying once these if they make it through, if they become bills, you're going to want to get your attorneys to weigh in on whether or not this pertains to you. I don't have a stormwater utility fee, therefore, I don't see how this would pertain to me at all. Um,
Yeah, this one, if you're a drinking water or sanitary sewer, utility or something combined like Metro Water Services, then yeah, this could be hugely impactful. But granted, you have 30 days. I mean, if you're turning things around in a week or less, then got nothing to worry about. But, God forbid anybody go on a long vacation or something.
Yeah. And then this one's a little different. It's got some 60-day notices in there. It just go through and read these.
But
These
I will say that that notion at the beginning of easier to amend than write an original bill, the one that was submitted last year ended up being 10 business days to approve the plans, just like that one is. But then they amended it to be 10 calendar days. So they tightened the screw a little bit there, where 10 calendar days, you submit it on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. It's really not that much time to finalize and review those plans. So this once this bill's in, they could change those time frames in a future legislative session.
Yeah, so it looks like the amendment and the initial bill are a little bit different.
Mhm.
Hence a little bit of confusion there. So I would just say keep an eye on it and we'll
Yeah.
see how many more amendments come out, and what happens with that one. We're not saying it's definitely not a done deal yet.
In this one, gosh, it's really tough to read this one. We called it kind of the word puzzle, but it if an area, it's about de minimis compensatory mitigation. So they're trying to say that even if your site is 0.75 acres, you still get that de minimis that you don't need to mitigate for underneath that. So if it's under a quarter acre, you don't need to do any compensatory mitigation. But if it's 1 acre, you don't have to mitigate for that whole 1 acre. You have to mitigate for 0.75 because they just give you that de minimis amount. It took us a lot of reading. Paul Davis helped me out with this one. Thank you so much, Paul. But that passed the Senate yesterday, and companion House bill has been substituted, meaning that the House saw that the Senate passed it and they said, great, cool. So that one is heading to the governor's desk. And that is kind of an accompanying bill to that wetland bill, right? Where they talk about that de minimis amount and how much you need to do mitigation for. It's just further eroding or easing the ability to do very small wetland filling and alterations.
And this
This
will
one,
have an amendment. The HBO 612,
mhm,
it did have an amendment.
yeah, they withdrew the amendment
Oh,
on
they
that
did
one.
withdraw it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this one, HBO 613, was really putting the screws to TDEC to try to do an annual report on the type of compensatory mitigation that they were doing. It accompanied that bill we were just talking about, where they wanted to know more about how and what the mechanisms were for compensatory mitigation. That was actually withdrawn, so we'll see about that. And that may have been part of the amendment that was withdrawn on 612 as well. But TDEC does not have to include information on the mechanism of compensatory mitigation. So good on that one. HB 0795. We spent a lot of time talking about this one at Confluence too, because this was the one where we had several different clauses where the more you read it, the more you're like, oh, I don't know, this could be very, very impactful. Um, the local government would have to send back any requested changes and a single deliverable, remit related fees back to them for change requests. Okay. But then this big one, prohibit local government from requiring a developer or contractor to fund, develop, or contribute to the development of non-essential infrastructure unless otherwise agreed upon by the parties. And so there was this enormous debate about what may be considered non-essential infrastructure. We decided that it could be, let's say you're building a sanitary sewer main that would hook up 500 homes or something like that on the edge of town, and those 500 homes only need a 10-inch sanitary sewer pipe. But you see in the future, hey, everybody back up in this basin may eventually want to tie into this pipe. We're going to have you size it at like a 12 or a 15 for future flows. They could consider that to be non-essential because they have no plan proving that there's going to be X flows in the future. That's one instance of maybe non-essential infrastructure. Maybe the same thing could be said for drainage, that they don't need to create drainage for something with a higher impervious area further up in the basin if you're mid-basin. A lot of different ways that non-essential infrastructure could be misconstrued or abused here, but fortunately that failed. Great news. That was I think there was just too much going on in this bill. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these things come back next year in different packages or reworded. That is ordinarily what we see, especially like with the wetland bill. It was sent to summer study. They're like, we don't have enough information to make a strong ruling on this. So this failed, and I would wager to say that it was probably on the ambiguity of that non-essential infrastructure piece. But this was a big threat. I called several MS4s and utilities and said, "Have you seen this? You know, your development fees may be completely at risk here, and you know they're going to try to make you pay for virtually every type of infrastructure that you're going to have to do within your city limits, rather than levy a reasonable fee." To help connect drainage and other water infrastructure. So good news that this failed. Any thoughts, Sheila, on this one?
I'm just ecstatic that it failed. Ooh, one win.
One win among these. And this one, similarly, we did some brainstorming on HB 0796 yesterday as well, because this was passed on second consideration back in February, and we haven't seen any movement on it since then. So I'm not sure what's up with this bill. Passed on second consideration says to me that it's already been passed, but you ordinarily it hasn't. It would move to behind the budget, and the governor would sign it. No motion since February, but a public utility should not require that utility infrastructure be constructed by the utility. In my opinion, okay, fine. You can hire a contractor to install utility infrastructure, sure. But then it allows a customer of the utility the option to use the contractor of their choosing for that infrastructure. So we're like, why do we need to say this? Why do we need to codify this? And Sheila, you mentioned step systems.
Yeah,
You have some insight
I was
into that?
afraid they're trying to just like say that you can't, if you have a group that maintains, and like we have consolidated utility, they have rules on whether or not they have to be the people who maintain it and construct and who, I mean, I don't really know. I'm just afraid that maybe that's where some of it came from. They're trying to say who can own these systems, who can't own them. I don't really know, and it's really weird that there's been nothing since February. But does anybody else have any information on this particular one? I can only see the chat. I can't really see if anybody got their hands up.
Mhm.
If you do, you can unmute and go ahead. Too many screens here.
Yeah, well, my other thought, if nobody else has any, is I mentioned lead and copper rules and lead and copper replacement, where the rule with lead and copper is that the utility owns X distance up to the house on a lateral, and oftentimes the private consumer will own the rest of it, and you get informed that that is in need of replacement, and the utility has to offer you that replacement, but you don't have to accept that. That you can say, okay, I don't want to be in charge of that. You just do your portion of it, utility. So maybe this offers the private consumer the ability to choose your own contractor to replace a lead service line that is on your private easement. So that's one thing I saw in my mind as I thought about this.
Yeah.
But
So John Carson says it's very difficult to legally bar a licensed contractor, and Roger says could be for alternate sewage treatment systems, which is what I
yeah,
was thinking. It was for alternate systems,
yeah, agreed.
but we don't know.
Yeah, and nothing since February, so we'll be refreshing this page to look for when it crosses the governor's desk.
Yeah.
And talking about, just if I can for a second here, the lead and copper rules. I've heard, and this is speculation and rumors about a lot of stuff on a national level. There's some talk that those lead and copper rules may be relaxed under the current administration. So stay tuned on that. And in addition to the lead and copper rules, PFAS rules, that zero point 0.4 parts per billion, that number um, may be up for debate in the coming months. But we're talking at a very interesting time in American history, let alone Tennessee history, for a lot of these bills. So stay tuned. I'm glad we're all getting together and thinking about this sort of thing. But if you hadn't been keeping your ear to the ground politically on a state and national level, it's stuff's moving faster than it has for many, many years. And on top of that, the other week we found out, TNSA sent an email about this, that the BRIC program was being reconfigured or essentially canceled. So BRIC was building resilient infrastructure in communities, and it was a funding program for FEMA to kind of get ahead of potential disasters by having a grant program for infrastructure that was not resilient. Let's say there's a pump station that's within the 100-year floodplain, and that needs armoring or something like that, to try to get ahead of disasters rather than just recover from disasters. But the pivot now with this administration is to simply take all that money away and put it back into disaster recovery, which is I get it. I get the notion behind that, but the BRIC money, if it wasn't already allocated or spent, it was revoked. So anybody that applied for funds in 2024 through BRIC ain't going to happen. Those, any time they spent putting together an application was essentially wasted. And that goes back to 2020 as well, that if you hadn't received your money yet, even if it was approved, you're not going to get it. So things on that level that seemed somewhat inconceivable are occurring right now. So uh, glad everybody's paying attention.
Aaron, do
And
you
that,
know if the BRIC grants were awarded to the state, but you haven't gotten reimbursement on it, are those being also pulled back?
mm,
We haven't heard back on that one yet. I think
that
the State
is.
Department's still trying to figure it out.
If it's been given to the state, if it's already been allocated to the state, you may be okay.
Okay.
But it's all about whether that money has been like signed off on. So stuff from 2023 is the stuff that's really in flux, right? Where in 2021 to you probably the funds have probably been dispersed and you may even be constructing some of these projects. But stuff in 2023, which was only given out in 2024, the money may not have actually left the coffers of the federal government yet to the states. So if it's gone to the state, I would assume that TEMA or whatever organization's in charge of that is going to disperse it.
Okay.
But I can't be certain on that one. Like I said, this was a week ago Friday. We're all trying to figure it out. But that was the real crash course. But I wanted to leave plenty. Yeah, we got 20 minutes or so to really chat about this kind of stuff, and maybe even refresh the browser and see if stuff's been ruled upon, and find out people's thoughts, where they see applications for these bills. Sheila has her MS4. I work for CDM Smith, who works with municipalities, so we have our limited vision of where we see these bills having effects. But love to hear what y'all think.
Did you do the one on the utility? Did I space that out real quick?
I think so.
What was the last one you did? Sorry.
Uh, I know they all blend together in my mind too.
No, because we had the one after that, which was the utility. Isn't it the HBO 796? Did we talk about that one?
Yeah, that was the one where we're talking about step systems and potential lead and copper
Oh,
replacement or alternative sewer systems. Yeah,
no, there's another. Hang on a second.
I'm still finding out about these things. The HBO 375, the one about the $500 and up, you need to have a cost basis. Michael Hunt told me about that one. Wasn't even on my radar. And as a bit of a background on several of these bills, one of the easiest way to see all of them is to search for Kevin Vaughn on the Tennessee website. He is a representative out in Collierville and the sponsor for, I believe, every single one of these bills in the House. He is an electrical engineer, but is really kind of the the point person for a lot of these infrastructure and utility related bills. And his region includes Blue Oval City, and there's a whole story there. I'm not going to give you the journalism on that, but look up a little bit about who sponsors these bills and who they are, and it'll give you an idea as to the cui bono and the intent on a lot of this legislation.
Yeah, I think now that you do that, it goes away. You can't search by him anymore, or at least I was trying and I couldn't, they weren't coming up. So I
Interesting.
usually type in the word wetland and it'll pull up all the things with wetlands. And I type in the word utility and it'll pull up anything with utility in it. I've had success looking up both of those ways, but there's probably many more. Let's see. Okay, let me go back. Let's see what
Yeah,
the
so
chat says. Sorry.
yeah, Janie, loss of brick is really just a lot of us at CDM Smith are in a real tailspin on that one because we touted that program from its inception as a great way for y'all to get money and to build all the stuff that we plan. So I was legit. I actually got on LinkedIn to write a post and I deleted it, which is probably a good thing because it wouldn't have been nice. Um, Jim is talking about he's heard of a water utility requiring a developer to use a particular engineer. Perhaps that's the same thing. That could be. Maybe they're insisting that I guess it could be black or white on that, where it says you don't have to use our particular engineer. It's saying that you can't do that if you don't want to, or that you have the authority to have folks use that private one of their choice. Josh is asking for a demo about how people can start getting notices about bills. Sheila, do you even really know?
I
I've been
just
doing
put
it
that in.
manually.
Does anyone else know?
Send out something in our, yeah, I was going to say Josh put it on there, but I did send out directions how to follow bills.
Good.
Oh,
Yeah, there's a whole way to do that. You can follow bills, you can follow committees. Josh is the one that told me about all that. So you just have to go in there and you have to create a login and password and everything.
sounds like Josh needs to demo how to get this information. Oh, there we go. Janie's got it. Log in, my bills, log in.
Right. HBO 375 isn't about monthly utility bills. It's about impact fees or whatever you want to call them for construction plan review fees or anything else that you have dreamed up, I guess. You need a justification and a basis for it. I think a lot of them will be straightforward. It's like, hey, this is an impact fee that is based on the amount of these that we get every year and where we're trying to get to in our budget. It's not completely capricious. We're not just taking money from you. We're trying to actually fund the department.
Okay, let's see. Got a
There
few
we
more
go.
things in the chat. Michael Hunt has put in here, legislation filed under municipal government. So does that helps you get straight to what you're looking for?
Yep. Yeah, there are classes. Utilities another one, water is another one, but sometimes stuff gets, I wouldn't say misclassified, but it's not what you or I think about when we think about water. So yeah, municipal government growth and development is A1 for what you're going to want to look at.
Very good, Michael. Great. Janie says, if you're an engineer, reach out to Casey Anderson. She tracks the engineering related bills pretty closely. And does that for TSPE. John's got another apps to track in there in the chat.
Yeah, and Kate makes a good point too that a lot of utilities have lists of trained contractors. That's very common that you have to choose from. I would think it's rare that there's one contractor that might be, I don't know, any utility maybe would balk at that just from a conflict of interest standpoint.
Yeah.
And then from a training standpoint too, I mean, if you want to get qualified bids, you would want a list of multiple contractors. Like to just have one or two, you're going to be putting out all kinds of RFQs or RFPs and hearing crickets. Or you get a bid that's so laughably low that you're never going to hire that person. Or high.
Does anybody have their hand up? I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time. There's so many people.
This is good though.
If anybody's has their hand up, if you are, like I said, you can just unmute and have input. Let's see. Has anybody else had any other conversations about this? Do they have any other information? We're just trying to provide like what we found on the legislative website. That way
Mm.
people can start tracking. We do not know how TDEC's going to interpret any of the wetland bills, and if it's one area of wetlands or if you've got a project with 10 wetlands, we have no idea. We don't, do that for TDEC. I'm assuming if these get passed, which it's kind of looking like the ones that are still moving may, that, TDEC will reach out and do some kind of education for us so that we know what that's going to look like for everyone. I just wanted everyone to be aware of what's happening and what's going on.
Right. And one of the big ones was that TRAM, getting a training for that. There just aren't a huge amount of people that have that training, especially in the private sector, as you might expect for somebody who's doing site plans or contractors. So the revamp of that program will likely include some sort of training structure so that more people can get that training, because they'll need to make a call as to the resource value of that wetland and its delineation. Yes, we have the screening tool, and that'll help you get a really good idea of like what exactly is on site. But the scrutiny on, is it 0.24 or 0.26 acres? Oof, there's going to be a lot of people probably standing out there and pointing at a few sedges or, kicking the dirt a little bit to try to get a de minimis. That already kind of happens, but. And then artificial wetlands will be an interesting one as well. I'll use an example in the city of Franklin. We were helping rehabilitate a dam that had created a wetland through a leak, right? And, that's an artificial wetland. And it's like, okay, do we need to mitigate for this loss of a wetland because we restored the dam? Okay, we will, but like that's not like a relic hydric soil or something that was created by a leak in this dam. So, I see there are some silver linings and I think some reasonable approaches to these definitions that are being put forth by TDEC. The reason it's 158 pages or whatever are because of all of those exceptions that came up during summer study.
Does anyone else need help on how to find these things and look at them? Because I mean, the only that we could share the screen from the website and kind of show how to get through some of this stuff but if you guys all feel really comfortable with it, we don't need to waste your time.
Right. That's one of these things is I could sit there and read all these to you verbatim, but that's not a tremendous use of everybody's time. You get in there and read what's passed. We just wanted to get those numbers on your radar and help because some of them, I mean, they're law. So
Yeah.
there may be some guidance that comes out, but it's specifically around TDEX orbit. But some of these things, when it comes to like the utility review, if you never heard about that, all of a sudden the contractor is like, hey, you was 30 days and you didn't do it. We're going to third party review. You'd say, what? You can't do that. Well, we'll look right here. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know over the next few months and a year, if that becomes law, how many times that's happening, who's doing it and what. It's one of those things where I kind of want to know and keep track of who the developers or whoever else are that are doing this. Like we can look, they're looking at us, we can look right back and keep track of this.
Mhm. Roger said he's gonna have to go get his law degree out to help figure out how to interpret all these. That's the question, is how do you interpret some of this stuff? And um, you know, I think if you are a stormwater utility fee, then you might want to go ahead and start reaching out to your attorneys and say, hey, if this gets pushed through, does this affect me? This is this is how we review them. This is what we do, that's just kind of where we're at. Like you're going to have to reach out to some of your own people and figure out if it's actually going to affect you. Because I know a lot of you guys do have stormwater utility fees, and initially it didn't say stormwater, but then the amendment came out and it said
Mhm.
stormwater. So that's when I was like, oh no, this is gonna affect our people. So we wanted to get this out here to you guys. So we have some chat about the wetland tool. It is really, really good. We are really liking the wetland tool that TDEC put together. But they are saying, it does miss a few places here and there. I would say that's probably accurate. And
Mhm.
does the wetland tool, does it give you high quality, medium quality? Because the quality of them seems to gonna be part of the concern. And
Yeah, and that all last year, why this went to summer study were, I saw so many draft amendments about this where it was like, okay, half an acre of moderate, no, 1 acre of moderate, half an acre of high quality. Well, there aren't that many high quality. It was this enormous debate.
yeah,
And I think they kept saying, well, how do we even classify that anyway? And they have to kind of blow on a dusty book and say the TRAM. Well, okay. We need to get that codified and get more people trained in what those resource values mean. Because, you could take Aaron Rogge's point of view is that all wetlands are high quality wetlands. Like, come on, man, they're low quality wetlands. I made this point in these workshops and beat the table and was a real tyrant. I'm just kidding, but I was like, there's connections to the aquifer below. There are multiple things that a mud patch does that's not just stand in the way of a 3 bedroom house.
right. So Janie and some others are saying no, it doesn't. So I didn't think it did. It
Mhm.
doesn't qualify what
Um,
type. Just gives you an idea. It might be there.
Yeah,
Um,
that's TBD. I think eventually it might, but then I feel like that's a boots on the ground thing. The screening tool itself is based on data products like aerials and LiDAR. And there's just, you're not going to be able to, like I said, if they're using, I don't know the TRAM, but in my experience with wetland delineation, you look for like, that's a wetland plant. That's a facultative upland plant. There's hydric soils, there's iron inclusions, there's, all these different things that you can put together, much like the HDs have for streams, either primaries out or you have all these lovely secondary indicators. That's likely what we're going to see get completely refined and will have to be done on a site. So you can say, okay, we have 0.75 acres of wetland on the site. We agree on that polygon. Within that polygon, we got to have somebody go out there and do borings or find fish and salamanders, whatever it takes to primary this thing out. So
yeah.
that's likely what we'll see. And I talked to Ann Morbid about that, and she kind of soft gave me a yeah, that's what we're looking at, but she couldn't commit.
We do have a question. Is John Carson still on? Michael Hunt is asking if MTAS is planning to put together anything on these bills or for possible changes for municipalities. John, are you still out there? Oh, I don't know. He's muted. He is there though.
Yes. Would you repeat the question, please?
The question to John is MTAS planning on putting anything together on these changes for municipalities? So once legislation session closes and they figure out which bills are actually going to become bills, are you guys going to put something together for municipalities about it?
Yes. We'll have the legislative updates presentation that we do every year and go over what each of these mean for municipalities.
Okay. When do y'all normally do that?
Uh, Usually like within a month after the session ends.
Yeah. I think everybody's going to be on the lookout. We got a lot happening. Charlene, would you like to tell everyone where they can go to get the recording and the PowerPoint?
Be emailing out the PowerPoint to everyone with your PDH certificate. So if I do not know that you attended, you are not on my attendance list. If you have a phone number or you did not register for the TNSA talk, so make sure to put your information in the chat or email me at Charlene, CHARLENE at tnstormwater.org. We also have a page where all of our TNSA talks are located, and it's YouTube page, and just click in the Tennessee Stormwater Association. And hopefully, I haven't had any issues. I had some blankouts a little bit earlier. I'm using a new computer because my computer hasn't been working so well. But anyway, just so you know, that they will be located on there as long as this processes the video correctly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah.
Any other questions or any other things anyone needs? If we need to do a follow-up from this in a few months, we'll look at talking about that as well.
Okay. We did have one more question. It says, John's asking, John Carson says, what wetlands comment period was ending Tuesday of next week? Does anyone have an answer for that?
I don't know.
I don't know.
The general ARAP public comment period is this Thursday. Are you saying next Thursday?
It said Tuesday of next week is what John said. I don't know.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Well, like I said, we're doing our best to give you information that we read this morning.
Yeah.
So, if we see anything new, we'll try to keep you up to date. But of course, John Clarson's on our team, and he's working hard to help you out. And stay tuned, everybody.
Just want to say thank you guys for doing this. I know it's a lot of information. And it's very, very important to keep updated. And I try to send out information when I receive it. Things move so quickly, so it's just hard to keep updated about all that's going on. But if you guys will send me that PowerPoint, I'll send out their contact information in this email as well, as well as your PDH. And if any one of your folks missed this and they want to check it out, I will have this up by Friday on our YouTube page.
Yeah. Call me about this stuff, and stuff about BRIC or about FEMA, these other topics. If you have questions, we got a stable of people that can help you out with these head scratchers right now, because it's all we talk about in the office, what we're going to do today. Read the news first thing and then figure out what we're going to do.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Good rest of your week.